Hello, and welcome to Tech Connects, Dice's podcast where we dig into topics on tech hiring, recruiting, and careers that matter to you. I'm your host, Nick Kolkowski, and today we're going to be talking about AI and other topics with Paul Farnsworth, who's president of Dice. I wanted to talk to Paul because he's had a long career in tech as a specialist and a manager. He's overseen huge teams, worked on complex projects, and deeply understands the tech industry. With that in mind, I wanted to ask him about the current tech landscape and how he thinks tech pros can best prepare themselves to meet the current moment. So let's listen in. Well, thank you for being on. It's actually been something like 2 years since you were last on as a guest. The format still hasn't changed, but it's good to have you back. And I wanted to talk to you because there's a lot going on in tech at the moment. We're seeing a lot of economic uncertainty. There's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of hiring freezes. There's also a lot of hiring. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are gearing up, and for AI workers and all kinds of other specialized tech pros. And I'm kind of wondering what you're seeing out there from your 35,000 foot view, to use a cliche, about kind of which skills are really important and prominent right now, and how you think individuals should sort of be proactively developing those skills to kind of thrive in a really weird time for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Regardless of all the chaos that might be going on right now, the core is still the same. I think of kind of what you need to do, and that is, what should you be doing? I think all technologists, depending on kind of where you are in your career, face a kind of pivotal choice at some point, which is, if I'm going to progress in my career, I'm either going to have to become more of a manager and a leader and lead people, run a functional group, or I'm going to become a much more a specialist or an expert in a certain area. And both of those paths have both pro and cons. A lot of people thrive being a technical specialist, and some people thrive being a leader and a manager. So I think you pick, depending on the path you pick, though, I think you get into what do you need to do to proactively develop the skills that you have. I think and there's volatility and change in both of those paths. So let's pick the technical specialist path first, and then we'll come back to the manager path in a minute. For the technical specialist, clearly you are going to continue to do what you have been doing in your career to begin with, which is experiment, play, and try and use the magic technical crystal ball to see, is the skill set and the technology you're using likely to get abstracted or improved upon, and how do you actually learn the next generation of skills? And we're seeing this really push into developers and a whole bunch of professions in IT with the adoption of generative AI and AI in general. And I think, it's one of those things where if you're not using AI every day now and you're in technology, you probably need to really start thinking about what do you need to do to develop that skill set and embrace it. There's some pros and cons to that, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And then I think, there are pockets of technology where you may have a look at the technology and decide that it's such a anchor technology, and old school Java, old school COBOL, old school SQL servers that have been around for years and years and years. As people move up, funnily enough, those older disciplines start to become more valued too, because there's just less people who have expertise in it, and that's likely to maintain over the course of my career. I've seen technology that people have professed as dead become very fulfilling and lucrative careers, just because there's less people that understand them. Now, you get a little bit less flexibility, of course, because if you're going to be a mainframe programmer, there is a limited number of businesses that still use that big iron. So, you're kind of limiting down there a little bit. So that's the technical specialist role. I'll pause there, see if you've got any questions on that, and then we'll get into the manager side.
I mean, I think the manager side dovetails neatly into the question that I was going to ask next, which is, there's obviously your technical skills, but then there's also the soft skill part of the equation, which, comes into, obvious play when you're managing people. And I assume that when you go on that manager track, that growing and developing those soft skills, which soft skills is the question, but growing and developing some subset of soft skills is absolutely essential. So, I mean, I assume that's sort of the next part of this particular equation.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's interesting because if you're a technical specialist, you become very passionate about the engineering and the technology that you are a specialist in. You know, that old saying, you know, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, there can be a little bit of that. When you become a manager or a leader, and there's definitely some differences between, you know, what constitutes being a good manager and what constitutes being a good leader. That's probably a longer conversation at some point for the future. If you're becoming a manager, one of the biggest shifts that you have to do is you have to start thinking in a more abstract way about what's the right thing for the business that you're working in, and less about the technology and the engineering. So that's definitely a shift when you're a technologist. And with that comes things like the ability to really understand what crisp decision making looks like, and how you put some of the decision making frameworks in place so that you're able to kind of abstract the you from the decision making and look at it from the lens of what's the right thing for the business. And that's tough, right? If you get asked, hey, we need to reduce the number of engineers in your team, as a manager, there's lots of reasons why you probably don't want to do that, but looking at that decision through the lens of the business is super important. The other thing I think which becomes important in terms of soft skills when you become a manager is both negotiating skills. There's a lot of negotiating that goes on. Technologists talk all the time about that triangle of time, quality, and requirements. That's a constant negotiation all the time in there. So good negotiating skills and understanding what that means is super important. Communicating skills have been core. And then I think one of the biggest underrated skills that technologists can develop, and as a manager and a leader become really important, are presentation skills. And I'm not talking about can you use PowerPoint. What I'm talking about is, can you understand how to present complex ideas or complex solutions in a way that's going to connect and resonate with the audience that you're pitching to, whether that's an entire group of engineers that you're managing or the CEO of the company that you happen to have bumped into in the elevator. That presentation skills is something which is absolutely critical. So decision making, negotiation and presentation skills, communication, and then relationship building. But I'd say relationship building is actually broad across both those tracks.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the interesting thing too, in terms of those soft skills, is that those are, I mean, as much as AI is learning to do things like spit out code snippets and whatnot, I mean, negotiation is not something that AI can effectively do. Presentation is definitely not something that AI can effectively do, especially if it's, your 30-second elevator pitch. So, I mean, those are things that are kind of, future proofed is the first term that's coming to mind, but might not necessarily be the right one in terms of you develop these skills and they can help you through all the various kinds of turns and twists of the economy and the tech industry as a whole. The terms of, I mean, and you ended that by mentioning, kind of relationship building and so on and networks. And that's the other thing that I kind of want to get to, because a lot of tech pros that we talk to, particularly younger tech pros out there, are sort of in a bit of a pickle. And that pickle is, a lot of them are applying for tons of jobs and not really hearing anything. And they're also trying to kind of build up their contacts and use personal connections to land jobs and find opportunities and things like that. And so a lot of the questions that we get at Dice tend to deal with, how do I build up my network? How do I maintain my network? How do I make sure that my network actually reflects what I want to do with my career? And I figure, I mean, given that you've been in every role in tech, you've ascended up, through all the way to the senior management role. What would your advice be, particularly to younger tech pros, about kind of how do you build and maintain a network that actually works for you? I mean, because it seems like such a tricky thing from the outside for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, it is, and it's something. Look, I've been preaching as a leader and a manager and a mentor for my teams, for people to really kind of understand the power of this. I probably break it down into three specific chunks when it comes to networking, and there's a lot of material online about the nuance of all this, so we can even get into some of that if we want to, but I'll kind of leave it fairly general. The first thing is if you are currently employed in a role in an organization and the organization's bigger than, I don't know, let's say it's a 12-person startup, bigger than that, there's a lot of value in understanding how much power there is networking within the company that you're in. That's a very close proximity of individuals that you're working with that often have clear line of sight on the value of the work that you're doing. And I meet all the time in team members who tend to stay within their silo and lack or don't take advantage of opportunities that companies create to network. Now, with that comes some basic skills, and this is, some people are more naturally inclined to it, some people aren't, but it's a learned skill. This isn't something that you don't necessarily have to be born with, and that's basically the basic skills of conversation starting, right? So you go to the company picnic, or there's an online event or something like that. How willing are you to step out of the group that you're in and go and talk to somebody, a colleague who may be in a different functional area? And on the basis, on this, you have to look past the fact that, why would I talk to someone in marketing when I'm in engineering? I don't have anything in common. In fact, they kind of annoy me, those marketing people sometimes. But actually going and finding that connection and bridging becomes really important, because as you then build that broader network up, all sorts of opportunities come. And this is the second part of this, which is you've got individuals that you're working with closely, and it's important to maintain that. And the longer you get in your career, the more that becomes valuable, because particularly in the modern working environment, it's unlikely that you're going to stay with the same cohort of co-workers for the 30, 40 year of your career. People move around all over the place, and that brings enormous opportunity for you. But you have to make an effort to stay in touch with that core group that you've built, and not when you need them. So pinging someone and saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you want to grab a coffee? Might work, but actually part of the trick here is to make sure that you're maintaining some level of connection with individuals once a year. Doesn't matter how the frequency is, just to make sure that when you actually need the network that you've built, that people aren't just surprised to hear from you. That's not great either. This brings me on to the next bit, which is there's an article written about the power of secondary networks. So it's not the people it's the people you know that they know. The Kevin Bacon effect, I guess, is the short answer to this. But maintaining good relationships there. If you see an old colleague maybe post something on a social media platform, it's not hard to put a comment in, hey, nice post, or like, or whatever it happens to be. That kind of informal interaction is super helpful. It also means that if you are in an opportunity where you're needing help in something, when you go and ask that secondary or that first contact, they're thinking about people they know that they can often connect you. And in my career, I actually have found new roles by staying in touch with people in my immediate network I'm not working with directly, who know other people who are looking for something. And it happens to have been through that kind of casual relationship. And then the last one is, how do you build relationships with individuals you have no connection with whatsoever? And it's got easier with social media and platforms where you can build some relationship. Engineers are particularly good at this when they have a problem to solve. Like, I have a problem with this library. I go onto a community support forum and interact with other people. You can build those networks up relatively easily. I still believe, though, there's a lot of power in looking in your local area, wherever you happen to be, and finding user groups or communities that meet together. I'm a member of a number of engineering and technology societies. There are usually meetups, and they're becoming more common now. We're through kind of the back of the pandemic. There's nothing beats going to these events in person and making those connections. That comes to the skill, though, that isn't just networking, isn't necessarily the skill, but there is some skills to be born with how to become a good conversationalist and how to make a connection with somebody. It's the old thing around you can literally be viewed as the smartest person in the room, and you don't ever really say anything. You just ask questions. That's all you do. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of this advice would also apply to mentoring, which is another thing that a lot of tech pros seem really interested in, is finding a mentor. And it seems like a lot of these strategies would be kind of mapped pretty well to finding older, presumably technologists who would yeah, kind of help you along with your career.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I mean, the other thing too is that a lot of the conversations that I've been having, I'm sure you've been having as well, including the one that actually I just got off with the head of AI at a company called Turnitin. But the tech industry has always been fast paced, and it seems like it's only accelerating with the advent of AI and machine learning and so on. And it seems like we're in one of those inflection periods where everything within a couple of years is going to look so radically different from sort of what's been happening now. And so a lot of tech pros, because of that, are concerned about sort of the relevancy of their skills, and they're concerned about, they might have just graduated school and they want to keep learning, or they're kind of further along in their careers and don't really want to, they might not even have the bandwidth to like learn new skills, but they sort of realize that they kind of need to do this in order to stay ahead of the curve. I guess what would your advice be to them about not only like kind of looking for new training opportunities, but also kind of the best ways to be adaptable? Because I mean, at this point, you've been through any number of kind of twists and turns in the market. I think anyone who's been in tech for any length of time, you've been through like virtualization, the rise of the cloud, the rise of mobile, et cetera. Now we're in the rise of AI. How do people sort of surf those changes? Like, what's your best advice on that front for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. First of all, it's one of the joys of engineering and technology that it does change all the time. I mean, it's the why did you buy a new gadget syndrome, right? There's always something new you can buy and play with. I think part of the broad perspective of this, which is back to this, like, don't sweat the small stuff. You got to step back a little bit and look at the broader landscape. Is There's always a sense in engineering in my career where change is more imminent than it really turns out to be. It just takes longer, and because often this acceleration of technology, there are very few things which, you've seen those curves of adoption which shoot up like this. There are very few technologies really that hit that major inflection point and curve. There's a lot of other stuff going on doesn't really follow that pattern. So the first thing is everyone should just take a deep breath and recognize that while it seems like this change is really imminent, there's actually a longer path of change that you can take. That said, just like you said, being adaptable and staying curious is super important in engineering. And the wondrous thing in my career was when I started many, many years ago, access to the latest software, access to good computing, access to this stuff was only really available if you worked somewhere and they were investing in engineering and technology. And at some point in my past, and I would say this is probably at least 15 years ago, maybe more, I have personally had access to better equipment, better software, newer tools than maybe deployed in companies, because that lag of change occurs. I've just read an article about the fact that you really can run very powerful AI models now on a little MacBook Pro. And that's the kind of stuff which is being deployed in the cloud at scale. You get to play with all this stuff in your own time. So you've got to stay curious. You've got to play, and it helps insulate you, I think, from that. Then the last thing is that I think in any career, if you're employed and you're looking to make change, pulling the thread on how does this technology change help my business will help you drive and stay relevant in what's going on. And the two most important things to any business person is does it bring me more revenue? Does it help the top line? Does it make me money? Is it something I can sell? Does it bring money into the organization? And then on the flip side of that is, does it make me more efficient? And some of the interest in AI right now is, where is the potential to displace work that's been previously done that's expensive with technology which is cheaper and scalable? So if you are doing work that kind of you can tie to, does it help the business make money, or does it actually help save costs? And you can put innovation and continue to play and experiment in there, you'll be fine. There's no problem for you.
I feel like with AI that a lot of people are still in that kicking the tires mode with regard to, how much money is this going to save. I think that there was, and this goes to your point about, kind of how technology actually progresses, where you had a bunch of executives who initially thought that AI was going to live up to this hype that was going to eliminate every developer job within 2 years, that all these 100-person teams are going to boil down to one person with, decent prompt engineering skills. And now it's sort of moderated where people, it seems, are seeing AI as a tool, but not, I mean, that progression is slower. So that seems to align with a lot of what we're seeing kind of in the broader market. I guess, I mean, and that sort of dovetails to the last question I had, which is, every tech pro sort of, I think, realizes that all the other tech pros that they're working alongside are also learning skills, trying to figure out how to, grow both their technical and their soft skills. But a lot of tech pros are also wondering, like, how do you truly differentiate yourselves, particularly in like a really competitive job market, particularly for really super competitive jobs, and how do you build kind of a strong personal brand that really stands out? And I figure, again, because you have this holistic view and because you've been through a lot, you probably have good advice for them, particularly technologists who are just starting out, who have like no idea what a personal brand even is. But I figured you had some good ideas on that front.
Yeah, again, I think depending on where you are in your career, and again, if you're an individual specialist, or are you in a manager, are you becoming a technical expert or a more generalist leader? Different kind of subtle advice for both. But let's start with the individual, right? How do you get to stand out there? It's the same as any profession. It's mainly depth of knowledge and competence is the core of it. And some of depth of knowledge and competence comes from, are you doing it a lot and are you really good at it? And that basically is the key. And in any organization, for a long time there was this 10x developer, right? Is that one developer that you hire or who seems to produce a lot more than everyone else. Because they have a high degree of knowledge in their field and they're very competent at what they do. The good news is, while I think the way we're connected now, the ability to learn online, all these tools that have come along have accelerated the rate of change. At the same time, they've actually also flattened the ability for anyone to learn anything, right? It's very easy to find the information. You go back in my career, used to get software on a CD and it used to get shipped, and
Floppy
you
disk.
had
Yeah.
access to it 6 months before everyone else got it shipped, and that was great. But now, of course, with online repositories, it's instantaneous for everybody, which is amazing. But really, it comes down to, if you want to stand out, you have to be competent and you need to have the ability to show a depth of knowledge. And how you build that depends on what your kind of overall aspirations are. Maybe you want to contribute and become an expert in a forum or on a code repository. Maybe you want to help build something which is more unique to show what the ability is. Maybe you are someone who is creative enough to pull together components which someone may not have brought together and show how a solution might be built. That's all great. You should go and do all that. Because you get recognized very quickly in any organization, if you're working for a small or a large company, that you can add significant value. That you don't worry about, trying to publicize yourself. It becomes very clear very quickly who can and who can't in those kind of situations. Now, at the same time, you have to balance that a little bit, because there's definitely been more focus on kind of the genius jerk syndrome, right? Just because you have an amazing depth of knowledge and you're incredibly competent doesn't mean that you can be a jerk at the same time. There's definitely some cultural impact to that. So, the other side of this is you've got to also balance that with some of those relationship building, negotiating, presentation skills. Because while you definitely can get recognized and rewarded for competence and depth of knowledge, ultimately, my experience is that there's a very fine line about how long you hang around if you're also a jerk in that situation. And that is a thing in technology, just like any other profession, which is tolerated to a certain point. On the management side, if you want to stand out, it's really about how do you provide value, and ultimately, it's often about, are you easy to work with, and are you driving solutions? Because I've worked in businesses where you have very, very bright people. They're building a framework because It's that old trick of, if I build the framework, that will build the thing I need. And they never finish the framework and you never get the thing you need. And they've ultimately look back and go, could have just done it myself quicker, honestly. It's a trap. It's a trap. So can you focus on what the end result is required and bring that together? And then are you doing it in a way which is making you easy to work with and, you can communicate with, and you're a team player? I think you're golden then. So.
Well, that was interesting. No matter what your position in the tech industry or your career goals, I feel Paul offered some crucial advice. Here are some quick takeaways. First, choose your path wisely and stay updated. As your tech career progresses, you'll likely face a choice between deep technical specialization and moving into management. Both require continuous learning. If you lean towards the technical side, make it a priority to explore and master emerging technologies like AI in order to remain relevant. Don't overlook the value of older, well-established tech, like COBOL or something like that, where expertise is becoming scarce, though be mindful of potential limitations in career flexibility. Regardless of your chosen path, actively cultivate your networking skills because those are universally valuable. Second, managers should prioritize business and people skills. If you're on or aspiring to become a manager, focus shifts from solely technical prowess to understanding and driving business objectives. Develop strong soft skills, make sound decisions aligned with business needs, master negotiation, especially around project constraints, and hone your presentation abilities to effectively communicate with diverse audiences. While your technical background is valuable, your ability to lead, collaborate, and prioritize business outcomes will be key to your success. Third, it's critical to network strategically and consistently. Building a strong professional network is vital for career growth, particularly for those who are early in their careers. Start by connecting with colleagues within your current organization. Crucially, maintain relationships with past colleagues as they move on to new roles. These connections can open future doors. Expand your reach by tapping your network's connections. Make an effort to stay in touch regularly, even when you don't need something, and consider participating in local tech meetups to build in-person relationships and enhance your communication skills. Fourth, it's also critical to embrace change and demonstrate value. The tech industry is constantly evolving, especially with the rise of AI. Be adaptable and maintain a curious mindset, continually exploring new technologies. Focus on understanding how these changes can bring tangible benefits to your business, either by increasing revenue, improving efficiency, or something along those lines. By aligning your skills with these business drivers and demonstrating your ability to contribute to these outcomes, you will remain a valuable asset. Remember that while technical expertise is important, being a collaborative and effective team player is equally crucial for long-term success in tech. There was a lot more than that discussion, of course, so give it another listen if you feel so inclined. Thanks for joining us, and remember, Dice is your best resource to find the tech talent you need to fill your open roles, and for tech pros, the best place to grow your tech career.